Beep beep. Welcome to a Jester special. It's a Jester special because there's a piece about me in the Mill. Now, the Mill is a fascinating organ. It's a website in Manchester, whom have taken a very unique and I think quite interesting stance on what journalism means and how journalism should be provided. So they have a subscription model in which people can subscribe, and they do, right? You can either subscribe for free. I'll put the links in the doobers to the Mill, right? You can either subscribe for free, or you can actually join, I think, for £70 a year, and they provide sort of insights into what's going on in Manchester, interesting stuff about concerts and what's going on, or meetups like this one's about, or whatever it may be. So they do these kind of, this is what's going on in Manchester thing. So they're interesting, right? They're interesting. It's an interesting thing that they're doing. So I was asked to speak at a cancel culture meeting in Manchester at the Britain's Protection by a friend of mine called Rob. Right now, I've spoken there a few times before, and it's always great fun because you've got some good people there. And this time I was speaking about DEI or diversity, inclusivity, and equity. Okay, the usual stuff that I rail against. But I did it from the point of view of education and what's happened to the education system in terms of the indoctrinating of children and young people from primary right through the way to the university system with trans ideology, gender ideology, critical race theory, all the stuff that comes under the critical social justice banner, the postmodern teat, as I call it, right? So we did this, and then we sat around for a bit after talking to Jack, and Jack was asking a lot of questions and stuff, and then he messaged me and said, can we meet up and have a conversation? So I said, yeah, no problem. Right. So I met up with Jack at a local hostelry where the two of us sat and he recorded for a bit. And then yesterday they put the article out, okay? And it's interesting because he's spoken to other people that were in the meeting, cancel culture meeting, and what he's done essentially is make us all out to be paranoid crackpots, which some of us probably are. So he's not telling an untruth there. And it's really interesting how he's characterized some of the stuff, and it's very, very illuminating to those of us that are involved in the current fight, to have Jack's view from an outside point of view. And it's nice to get that, an outside point of view. He says, I've got a tick in that I laugh at everything, even if it's serious. That's not a tick, Jack. That's a gift. See, there it is again. That's a gift, right? It's not a tick, right? Silly boy, right? So, but his description is very, very weird in some ways, because it seems to me that Jack's got an identitarian pair of glasses on. But you let me know. So I've got some of it. I'm just going to read out some of it to you. You can subscribe if you wish to read the whole article to the Mill. The links are in the doobers. Okay, so the meeting is packed. Perhaps 50 of us in total. Most of my fellow attendees are white men, but there are around a dozen women, one of whom is South Asian. What's that got to do with anything? That is utterly immaterial, Jack. Utterly immaterial. He says it's not exactly a diverse group. We're only interested in diversity of thought, Jack. That's all. And it's very likely that people at our meeting have similar thought patterns. They're trying to put things together. But what their race is and their sex is absolutely immaterial. Absolutely immaterial. Right? Except in one way. And this is the one way. It's not exactly a diverse group, but somehow is more diverse than I was expecting from a cancel culture get-together. What were you expecting then? All white faces? All old men? Which identitarian category were you hoping to tick when you came, and you were then able to see who the people were actually there who understood what was going on or wanted to? I don't know. But then you said, there are more women than I had imagined, and ages range from 30s upwards. That's interesting, Jack. Very observant. And it's good for you to say that. I'm glad you're saying that. Because what it shows is that you've done absolutely no work to understand how this stuff is affecting women. Despite the fact that I pointed you towards various resources, you didn't do the work. Right, now that's fine. You've just got your piece you've done today. So it might be something that you want to look at later. But my God almighty, it was the women that blew the whistle on this nonsense. It's the women that have been shouting about that since the 1980s, by the way. Some of them. And certainly very active since the 2000s. If you look at the work of, for example, Julie Bindel, or some of the original feminists who drew the alarms about this ideological infiltration into our society. They rang the bell, and yet here you are surprised that they were there at the meeting. Extraordinary. Absolutely extraordinary. He continues, the speaker today is Barry Wall. That's me, right? With a consultant and educator who says he worked in workplace DEI. I said, oh, right, okay. Training for decades before realizing how much of it is based on identitarian-based murderous ideology. It is based on an identitarian-based murderous ideology, Jack. Ask somebody else. You don't have to believe me. Or better still, go look for yourself. It's exactly what happens when equity comes to the fore and identity follows it. We're in Mao territory. We're in Mao territory. We're in Weimar Republic territory. Right? We are in serious danger when the utterances of these people are in the timeline of what we've seen before that becomes murderous. Equity is murderous. So yes, I did say that, right? I have a tick when he speaks, right, which is my gleeful cackle. I don't know why that's relevant either, right? And you will immediately notice this apparently if you spend some time on my YouTube. And even when I'm talking about something serious, I find it funny. Yep, Jack, that's what I do. On my YouTube, it's about humour. Wall, as he's now taken to calling me, Wall is gay, okay? Thanks very much. You've noticed. How kind. And since 2018 has been a strident member of the so-called gender critical movement. That's the women he's talking to. So-called gender critical movement. He has a YouTube channel called Court of the EDI Jester. EDI is a rearrangement of DEI. No, it's not, Jack. DEI is a rearrangement of EDI. EDI has been around a lot longer. A lot longer. It was always EDI. DEI is an Americanism. Where he posts videos critiquing queer theory and gender ideology. I do a lot more than that, but you're right. That's what I do. I critique it. He has more than 5,000 subscribers. In one video from last year, Wall breaks down an interview between the Guardian columnist Owen Jones, Tolkien X, right? Owen Jones, and feminist writer Judith Butler. Judith Butler's not a feminist writer. She's a queer theorist. This is basic stuff, Jack, right? He says Butler supports the insertion of queering into the lives of all, and particularly into the lives of children. Well, she said so in the video. She actually said that in the video. Jack, come on, man. Wall then says they've got to get them young. That's true, they want to get them young. That's what Drag Queen Storytime is all about. That's why these effers, fuckers, are in libraries with their trans and non-binary fucking creatures. Absolutely right, okay? Last week, Wall gleefully celebrated a Telegraph story about the government supposedly cracking down on civil servants who waste public money on diversity activism. Absolutely right, right? Absolutely right. I take great joy in when this stuff is eradicated. You know why? Because it means people won't have to listen to those that walk into a room and go, Christ, this room's white, innit? After housekeeping is completed, he tells us the education system has abandoned critical thinking as a concept and instead dedicates itself to turning children into activists that parrot woke ideology. Right? Yes, that's the work of Paulo Freire. Okay? Go and have a look. I've been in education long enough to know my stuff. Go and have a look. That's the work of Paulo Freire, you'll find. Which is being used in teaching up and down the country, in universities, across the Western world. This is basic. Why don't you look it up? Oh, well. So he then asks about the people who have come to the meeting. He says, who are these people? Are they bigots who resent the racism and sexism have become increasingly taboo in modern Britain? They haven't become increasingly taboo. Sexism and racism has been taboo for 20 years, right? You're 25. For years, we fought it. For years. It's the LGBTQ and the anti-racist nut jobs that have brought it back. It's the identitarians, right, who are the equity pushers of the murderous ideology that want us to be racist, that want us to be, at each other's throats. This is basic stuff, right? It's not conspiracy theories. Look at what's happened in the civil service. Look at what's happened in the BBC. It's all out there. It's not me, Jack. I just tell people what's happening. Okay? Right, so then he talked to Rob about what the group was about. I'm only giving you excerpts here because I want you to go and read it on their website. It started out as a group discussing the ideas of the controversial Canadian academic Jordan Peterson, who made his name writing about how young men have lost their way in a feminized society. That's not what he made his name on. He made his name on railing against the very thing that I told you was a problem in the beginning, which was the murderous ideology of equity. That's how he made his name. He has become something of a lodestar for incels and other anti-feminist groups, has he? So what? Right? You can quite easily find YouTubes of him destroying and or shutting down various women or trans people in debates. Jordan can't help what people do with his videos any more than I can. What are you attempting to do here? Smear him? Have you seen his series on the biblical stories? Have you listened to his lectures on leadership? Do you know anything about the man at all? Yes, I know. So he asked Rob, my mate, how he defines wokery. He can't. But he quotes Supreme Court Justice Potter Stewart's words on what constituted hardcore pornography. I know it when I see it. That's a famous saying, that one. That was in the West Wing, if I remember rightly, Jack. That was in the West Wing. Wokery, if you want a definition of wokery, go to New Discourses and have a look. They'll have a definition for you. I can give you one. A paranoid and psychotic obsession with power and oppression narratives based on identity characteristics pushed by hard left and liberal activists to bring about a utopia using murderous aims that have been used before. Okay? Good. Right, now. And then he quotes me again, right? So here we go. It's not about politics, I say, which is why you've got that mix of people, he tells me. There's something wrong about there's something wrong above politics, because politics is downstream of culture, right? I love it. And then he says, students of populism might recognise the formulation. Politics is downstream from culture is known as the Breitbart Doctrine, right? The Breitbart Doctrine, named after libertarian blogger Andrew Breitbart, who founded the pro-Trump outlet Breitbart News, and who argued that if you want to change politics, you have to chip away at culture first, for example, by influencing campus politics, Hollywood, or even video games. Jack, that's exactly what the critical socialist justice mob have done. So what you're trying to do, which is align me with Trump. Hey, Orange Man. What you're trying to do, which is align me with Trump, is actually you admitting exactly what it is that critical social justice do. And for your own information, just so that you know, the idea that culture was upstream of politics didn't come from that bloke at all, the blogger. It actually came, and the idea was implemented in 1928 by Bernays in his book Propaganda. I can do this all night. All right? Finally, the other strange thing is, or is it finally? I don't know. The other strange thing is that much of what the meeting's attendees say, more patriotism in schools, fairly standard conservative positions on how to define trans people, are the kind of things you hear from your local pub without any social pushback. They wouldn't be welcomed in the opinion pages of The Guardian, sure, but they're not views that you're going to get thrown out of society either. Well, Jack, I'm sorry to say that you've sort of, shot your bolt in the wrong direction there, love. Okay, I refer you to Professor Joe Phoenix, to Kathleen Stock, right? To Kathleen Stock, to Judy Bindel, to the women who have been forced out, like Maya Forstater, to Helen Joyce. I refer you to all the women and the men, James S's, right, who have found that to utter against the words of what you seem to think we are railing against in some kind of paranoid tin pot mad way are all victims of cancel culture that you singularly have failed to mention. Maybe we'll do that in the next one. Yeah? They do get you thrown out of society, Jack, and you haven't looked hard enough to find it. There are court case after court case after court case you could have quoted here, and you quoted nothing. Lazy, dear boy. D-, see me after. Right? There's the cackle again, Jack, the cackle. Right? So, and at the end, he can't resist a jab about the fact that I'm running the win mindset and it costs 60 quid a month. Fucking, Jack, the resources I gave you, man. You should have done a series on this. You should do a series on what's happening. You should do a series and talk to some of the women and understand why this is happening. Right? So just so that in case you don't yet get where I'm coming from, critical social justice, which you seem to have an enormous tolerance for, and not only that, seem to take part in the same kind of identitarian games that they play, is a murderous ideology. It's killed before and it will kill again. Now, my Jesterites and watchers of YouTube, you tell me, are the Mill right or am I right? And if so, what's the next topic the Mill should cover? So we can go and tell them. All the links you need are in the Dubras. You can tell them whether you think I'm right or wrong, and you can tell them what sort of topics you'd like them to cover. Perhaps they'd like to cover, what about the damage done to young people through puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and the savage surgery that's practiced on them in some kind of weird medical Frankenstein experiment. How about that? Right? How about the fact that we've got affinity groups by race or by sexuality or by gender identity in organisations, schools, and in colleges and universities that elevate these lunatics above normality? How about the fact that DEI, at its very core, is about elevation? It is not about equality, because it's equity. Perhaps they'd cover that. Or maybe they'd cover what's happened to the women that have spoken out and have been visited by the police. Perhaps they'd like to cover that. Maybe that would be something the Mill would like to cover. Or perhaps the Mill would like to cover the refusal by some bars to refuse women who are gender critical on Canal Street in Manchester. You want to cover that? Or perhaps they'd like to cover the takeover of Manchester Pride by extremist groups who support BLM. How about that? You want to do that? I think it'd be interesting for you to do it, you know, because honest to God, Jack, I think that it's great. Yep, do it. We're tin pot crack, you know, we're nuts. They're all paranoid. Do it. That's fine. Because there's no such thing as bad publicity as far as I'm concerned. And the more the group grows, the more the group grows. We all start off like that. But honest to God, Jack, I think you need to take off your identitarian blinkers. Because from what I see at the beginning of this document, you are unable to see outside of them. And that's a shame. Because I think you're a fine journalist. All right, that's my bit. That's my response to you. So, yeah, there's another meeting in there tonight, Free Speech Union. You coming? Hope so. Anyway, I might see you there. And if I don't, good luck, right? Because you could have had an entire series out of this. And this is what we start with? Really? I'm now going to cackle and go away. Oh. All in the Dooberries, the links, right? And come and be a warrior teacher, folks. This is exactly the crap we're fighting. I'll see you later.